Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sabbat Spooks. My name is Dana, and I will be your podcast host for this one, and for everyone, really. Before we begin the episode proper, I just wanted to let you know that I'm experimenting with a new way of presenting the Sabbat Spook topics that I cover. I would love to get your feedback and see what you like or what you don't like. If you would like me to keep this style, or if you want me to go back to how I usually do it. With that being said, let the show begin. Giorgio Sodder was born on November 23, 1895, on the island of Sardinia, the second largest island in the Mediterranean Sea. He was the second son of John and Maria, who had birthed their first child, Leonardo, in 1893. At the age of 27, he married Jenny Cipriani, and the following year, in 1923, the couple immigrated to the United States, eventually settling down in Fayette County, West Virginia. Due to some misunderstanding or misinterpretation, Giorgio's name was changed to George Sodder, which is the name I'll be using from here on out. Prior to settling in Fayette County, George worked on Pennsylvania railroads, carrying supplies and water to other workers, which was not always easy. After a few years, George took a better job as a driver in Smithers, West Virginia. It must have been a pretty good career choice, because he eventually started his own trucking company, which started off hauling dirt to construction sites, and eventually graduating to hauling coal and other freight. George and Jenny moved into a 2-story timber frame house 2 miles north of Fayetteville, the seat of Fayette County in West Virginia. His truck company bloomed, and he prospered, leading to the couple becoming a very well-respected middle-class family. Although smart and ambitious, George was quite opinionated about many things, but especially so world politics and Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. Fayetteville was home to a large population of Italian immigrants, and his opinions were met with disagreement and, to some extent, resentment. Only his youth and the reasons why he left his home country were never discussed by George. On August 15, 1923, George and Jenny welcomed their first child, John Frederick Sodder, into the world. The following year, on September 4th, their second son, Joseph Samuel, was born. Their first daughter, Mary Ann, whose nickname was Marion, was born on March 6, 1926. A fourth child, George Jr., arrived on September 30th, 1929. Another son was born on July 8, 1931, Maurice Antonio. Jenny gave birth to their second daughter, Martha Lee, on the 22nd of January in 1933. The couple's seventh child, Luis Enrico, was born on December 30th, 1935. Jenny Irene was the next child to be born, and the third to have a September birth date, the 19th of 1937. Following Jenny was Betty Dolly, who was born on March 4th, 1940. And finally, on the 5th of March in 1942, their 10th child, Sylvia Ann Sodder, was born, making them a family of 12. Not much is known about the family's life, but we do know that John registered for the military service in 1943 at the age of 20. Joseph also left home to serve in the military during World War II, when he was 21. By this point, the family had a small farm with chickens and cows. Marion, the eldest daughter, started working at a downtown dime store in Fayetteville. George Sr.'s opinions on Mussolini, which were critical, unfavorable, and harsh, seemed to spur on more resentment after the dictator was executed. In October of 1945, not long after the end of World War II, a life insurance salesman visited the farm, and it didn't take long for George to unceremoniously turn the man away. Disgruntled and less than pleased about George's political views, the salesman gave the Sodder patriarch a warning. "Your house will go up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed. You will pay for the dirty remarks you have been making about Mussolini." Not too long after the life insurance salesman came to the farm, another visitor stopped by. Now, there is little to no information about this second visitor, but it's believed they were looking for work. During their short stay, the mysterious stranger walked to the back of the house and, upon seeing the pair of fuse boxes, warned George that those boxes would cause a fire someday. This troubled George, as he had just had the house rewired when an electric stove was installed, and the electric company said that it was safe. In the weeks leading up to Christmas of that same year, John, who was 22, having returned home at this point, noticed an unfamiliar car that was parked along the main road, and that its occupants would watch as the younger Sodder children walked home from school. Joseph, the second son who had served in the military, was still serving and not home yet. The night of Christmas Eve, 1945, started out as a jolly one. 19-year-old Marion, the eldest daughter, had surprised her younger sisters, 12-year-old Martha, 8-year-old Jenny, 5-year-old Betty, with gifts, new toys to be precise. The younger children asked their mother if they could stay up past their bedtime, as they wanted to play with their new toys. At 10 p.m., Jenny agreed to let the girls play, as long as Maurice, who was 14 years old, and Louis, who was 9, remembered to put the cows in and feed the chickens before going to bed. George Sr., John, and George Jr. were already in bed, having worked that day. Jenny reminded the children to do their chores before taking 2-year-old Sylvia to bed with her. At 12:30 a.m., Jenny was awoken by the telephone ringing. She meandered downstairs, answered it, and was greeted by an unfamiliar female voice. The unknown caller asked for a name the Sodder matriarch didn't recognize, and the sound of laughter and glasses clinking could be heard in the background. Jenny told the caller she had the wrong number, and received weird laughter before she hung up and went back to bed. Before making it to bed, Jenny noticed that the curtains were still open, the front door was unlocked, and the lights were still on. Things the children usually took care of whenever they stayed up later than their parents. Seeing Marion asleep on the living room couch, she assumed the other children had gone to sleep in their shared attic bedroom. After closing the curtains and turning off the lights, locking the door, Jenny finally returned to bed. A mere half-hour later, at 1 a.m., Jenny woke up again, this time by the sound of an object hitting the roof with a loud bang, followed by a rolling noise. No further noises were heard, so she went back to sleep. For a third and final time, at 1:30 a.m., Jenny woke up, having smelled smoke. She got out of bed and found that George's office, which was the room nearest to the telephone line and the fuse boxes, was on fire. Jenny woke George up, who then woke up John and George Jr. Both parents, John, George Jr., Sylvia, and Marion, managed to escape. Eldest son John called up to the attic to his other 5 siblings, as he couldn't go up due to the stairway itself being on fire. With the exception of 2-year-old Sylvia, the others shouted and yelled to the remaining children, though no response was heard. With the phone not working, Marion ran to a neighbor's house to call the Fayetteville Fire Department. On a nearby road, a motorist saw the flames and went to the closest tavern to call the fire department as well. Both calls were unsuccessful, either due to there being no operator by the phone at the time, as it was Christmas Day, or because of a broken phone. The neighbor Marianne had gone to drove into town to track down Fire Chief F. J. Morris, who initiated the phone tree system, which, back then, was Fayetteville's version of a fire alarm, where one firefighter phoned another one, who phoned another one, and so on and so forth. While the fire department was being contacted, George Sr. tried to save his trapped children. He first tried re-entering the house by breaking a window, which only served to slice a patch of flesh from his arm and obscure his vision with fire and smoke. The fire had spread through the downstairs rooms, the living room, dining room, kitchen, office, and his and Jenny's bedroom. Undeterred, George raced outside with the plan to use his ladder to reach the second floor. Though it was typically propped against the house, the ladder was missing. George then decided he'd drive one of his 2 coal trucks to the house and climb on top of it to reach the windows. Neither truck would start, though they'd worked perfectly the day before. Lastly, he tried to scoop water from the rain barrel, but it was frozen solid. Distraught and frustrated, the remaining Sodder family members had little choice but to watch the house burn down and collapse over the next 45 minutes, assuming the other 5 children had perished. The fire department crew arrived at the scene at 8 a.m. Due to the war, they were low on manpower, and Chief Morris needing a driver for the fire truck, as he didn't know how to drive it. With little else to do after arriving, the firefighters shifted through the ashes that were left in the home's basement. At 10 a.m., Chief Morris informed the remaining Sodders that no bones could be found, as was usually the case, and that he believed the fire had been so hot that it had cremated Maurice, Martha, Louis, Betty, and Jenny. George Sr. was told by Morris to leave the site undisturbed, to allow the state fire marshal's office to conduct a thorough investigation. But the pain was too much to bear. 4 days later, he bulldozed 5 feet of dirt over the site, intending to plant a memorial garden for his lost children. The following day, the local coroner called for an inquest, which is a judicial inquiry held to determine the cause of someone's death, saying the fire was caused by faulty wiring and thus an accident. I think it's important to note here that the life insurance salesman who had threatened George weeks before was one of the jurors. On December 30th, death certificates were issued for the 5 children. The funeral was held on the 2nd of January, 1946, and while both George and Jenny were too heartbroken to attend, the surviving children did. It didn't take long for the Sodder family to question the official findings regarding the fire. If the fire had, indeed, been caused by faulty electrical issues, then why had the family's Christmas tree lights remain on during the early stages of the fire? Shouldn't the power have gone out? George's missing ladder had been found at the bottom of an embankment 75 feet away from the property. Jenny, who couldn't understand how no flesh or bones were found, conducted private experiments, burning animal bones to see if they'd be consumed by the fire. Each experiment ended with there being a heap of charred bones. Various household appliances had been found in the basement, still identifiable even after being engulfed in the fire. She was also told by an employee at a crematorium that bones would remain after a body was burned at 2,000 degrees for 2 hours. A telephone repairman informed the family that their lines appeared to have been cut and not burned. Following that, a witness claimed to have seen a man at the fire scene taking a block and a tackle used for removing car engines. While visiting the site one day, Sylvia found a hard rubber object in the yard, causing Jenny to remember hearing the hard thud on the roof, and George determined it was a napalm pineapple bomb, like the kind used in warfare. But the mysteries don't end there. A woman claimed to have seen the missing children looking out of a passing car during the fire. Another woman claimed to have served the children breakfast at a tourist stop approximately 50 miles west of Fayetteville. 4 of the 5 children was spotted with 2 women and 2 men of Italian descent a week after the fire by a woman at a Charleston hotel. George and Jenny sent the FBI a letter about their case, but the agency said that the Bureau had no jurisdiction, as the case appeared local in character. They would provide assistance if the local authorities granted them permission to do so, but the Fayetteville Fire and Police Departments declined the offer. The Sodders then turned to C.C. Tinsley, a private investigator, who had found out that the insurance salesman had been on the coroner's jury. He also discovered that although Chief Morris claimed no remains could be found at the site, he had found a heart in the ashes, which he hid in a box and buried at the scene. Morris eventually took Tinsley to the spot after much persuasion, and they dug it up. The heart was taken to a funeral director, who concluded that it was actually a beef liver, untouched by fire. Rumors began to circulate, saying that Morris had never found any remains from the fire, and that he had buried the beef liver hoping that the family would be sated enough to stop the investigation. Leads and tips kept pouring in as the years passed by. After seeing a photo of school children in New York City in a newspaper, George drove to Manhattan, convinced that his daughter, Betty, was one of the children. The parents of the child refused to speak with him. In August of 1949, the family brought in Oscar B. Hunter, a pathologist from Washington, D.C., and excavated the site. A partially burned dictionary, some damaged coins, and several shards of vertebrae were found, and Hunter sent the bones to the Smithsonian Institute. The institute concluded that the bones belonged to the same person, who was 16 to 17 years old, showed no evidence of being exposed to fire, and that, as there were no of the bones found, the vertebrae most likely came from the dirt George used to fill in the basement. George and Jenny erected a billboard along Route 16, offering $5,000 for information leading to the recovery of their children, which was increased to $10,000 shortly thereafter. More tips and leads poured in, all of which George traveled to investigate, and he always came back empty-handed. Sometime in 1968, Jenny received a letter with a Kentucky postmark, but no return address. It contained a photo of a man in his mid-20s, and that had a message written on the back that read, "Louis Sodder, I love Brother Frankie. Illy Boys, A90-132 or 35. As the man in the photo did have a strong resemblance to Louis, the couple hired another private investigator and sent him to Kentucky. He was never heard from again. The billboard was updated to include the new photo, but the actual letter was not published, as the family feared that it would cause unwarranted issues. George Sodder Sr. passed away on August 16, 1969, at the age of 71, still hoping for any information on his missing children. After his death, Jenny built a fence around her property and started adding on rooms to her home, further distancing herself from the outside world. She wore nothing but black since the fire, and continued to do so until her death on February 15, 1989, at the age of 85. Her children and grandchildren continued the investigation and came up with their own theories. Perhaps the local mafia tried to recruit George Sr., and he declined. Or maybe they tried to extort him for money, and he refused. Had the children been kidnapped by someone they knew? Someone who burst through the front door, told them about the fire, and offered to lead them to safety? If the children had and had lived for decades, did they fail to contact their parents in order to protect them? Will the truth ever reach the light of day? John Frederick Sodder passed away on November 8, 2001, at 78 years old. Joseph Samuel Sodder died on January 6, 2010, at 85. Mary Ann Marion Sodder died at the age of 79 on September 12, 2005. George Sodder Jr. passed away on November 9th, 2012. And Sylvia Ann Sodder, the youngest of the Sodder children, passed away on April 21st, 2021, at the age of 79. Sylvia's first memories were of that tragic December night in 1945, of her father, barefoot and bleeding, and the awful symphony of her family's screams. So yeah, there you guys have it. That is the episode. I would love to get your feedback on if you liked how I explained the Sodder children disappearance in a story format like that, or if you would prefer if I just went back to the old one. I hope you all have been doing well. I had a great week, a great weekend, but I'm very tired. I'm not gonna lie, I'm very much tired. I am thinking of starting a Patreon for the podcast. Of course, you do not have to at any point at all contribute. This is just if you would like to donate monies. And of course, you would get extra content. I'm still working out on what exactly I would do. If you guys have any clues or any ideas, please let me know. And yeah, it wouldn't be much. I think maybe just like $1 to $3 to $5. It wouldn't be a lot. And it would be for the purpose of upgrading the equipment for the podcast, the microphones, getting a better laptop, or even a actual oh goodness, the word is eluding me, an actual desktop computer. And that way, so I'd be able to edit more and do more things and stuff like that. But I'm still working out on tiers and rewards and stuff, because I don't want you guys to just give me money just to give me money. So yeah, I want to thank you for listening to this episode of Sabbat Spooks. I hope you all have a marvelously magical Monday, and I will see you, witches, in the next one. Bye, friends!